Hey, how's everyone doing today? Today, what I'm going to talk about is just want to talk a little bit about EdTech, instructional design, and kind of talk a little bit about the field. So what I'm going to do, one of the things I usually like to do each week is go into different forums and see what kind of questions they have and just talk about them and answer them. All right, so where I am now today, I'm on the Reddit forum. I saw some pretty cool discussions happening here over the weekend, just different things that I'd like to address, and thought that it would be good to, talk to them with a few people and, just basically just discuss the field, create a little video for people to hear that. So, all right, let's see. Basic question right off the bat: is ID right for me? I've created a specific video, talking to this question that I see so often: is ID right for me? I don't know if ID is right for someone. I think if you enjoy developing training, you enjoy a job that's different all the time, not the same every day, you definitely have to enjoy communicating and working with people. I think that it can be for you. Do you like working with technology? You don't have to, but work with tech in our field, but it's a big plus if you can. That was the thing that really made me interested in the field. When I became interested in the field in the late 90s, I was interested in web design, and there was really no such thing as a major in web design. Computer science was all, advanced, object-oriented programming. There really wasn't graphic design was not on the computer yet. It was really, any computer design like that was really new. So there really was no major of web design. So, I got into ID because I was able to actually learn some HTML and do some basic web page design. So that's what kind of got me into the field. But is it right for you? I mean, it's good pay. It's been very consistent. I've been in the field, working since 2002, 2003 timeframe. So we're in 2019 now. I've never really seen a slump. Obviously, when the economy tanked in 2008, the jobs just shifted because there were tons of government jobs, as there always are in our field. And especially like military and stuff during wars and everything, there's lots of jobs in our field, always. People asking about different programs. I'm not going to comment on different programs. I do talk about, how to find a master's or a doctoral program in our field. Some of the big things. One of the things I've been contemplating lately have really been two things. A, how should we admit people into master's and doctoral programs in instructional design? Should people take tests? Should they write a letter? Should they have letters of recommendation? Should they write something? What is the criteria for admitting someone into our program or into any program? And it's a really interesting topic. I'm not 100% sure there's a right answer. I'm way against the tests. I'm against the tests for a few reasons. One, they cost money. Potential students don't like to spend money, and it's a waste of their money. Secondly, the tests cause anxiety. So like, if you haven't been in school for 10 or 15 years and all of a sudden I'm telling you to go, take a test, that's pretty nerve-wracking, especially because a lot of the students are working full-time. They have children, activities, family stuff going on, and they don't have time to sit there and really study, which they're going to need to make the time for school, but the test is a whole different beast. So I really don't like it. I also don't like the scores. I don't like interpreting the scores because I feel like there are some validity issues there with me interpreting the scores incorrectly. So I really don't like that. So, I try not to do that. So what makes a good candidate? Some of the things I look for as I'm reviewing applications, I look at GPA. Even if it's 20 years old, it's not an indication of who they are now. Completely different person. But if you got like a 3.7 20 years ago and you're working and doing well in life, you have a good resume, I'm not going to be too worried about admitting you. If you had a 2.0 20 years ago and you've been working and doing really well, we'll try to work something out with you, because I think those students who have work experience that did well when they were, 19, 18, 19, 20 years old, I get it. You mess up, you do, school's not always the most important thing, but come back to that same person when they're 27. you're like talking to two very different people. That is not the same person. So you got to take that into consideration. So I can't just weigh GPA as the greatest thing. I really like to look at a person's resume. It's almost like a job interview. We're looking at their resume and determining if they're a good fit or not. That's really what I like to do. Think about some things like that. I just like to see like what a candidate's really going to look like. It's no different than me hiring for any kind of position. So, that's kind of, is instructional design for you, or what should you look for in a master's program? Those are some of the things you want to think of. That's just me talking about like admitting someone. But if I was a student looking for a master's program, some of the things that I would look for, oh, wow, have completely changed, from what I would have thought when I was a student, 20 years ago. But, if I was looking for a master's program, I would make sure that the program was geared towards my end goal. So like, let me talk about some examples. So specifically, let's go to the master's level, because I'm in a master's level program, not PhD. So I don't want to necessarily, harp on something that I'm not in, something that I'm not doing. I have a doctorate in the field. I know about the programs, but just talking about the master's degree, so what would I look for as a potential student in a master's program? Some of the things that I would look for, I would make sure, so the big thing is the end goal fulfilling? Like, is the program geared towards my end goal? So like if my end goal was like career transition, like I wanted to get a job at the end, I would make sure that the professors were working in that field. What does that mean? It can mean a bunch of different things, but like, if I am a teacher and I'm going into corporate, which is common, that's what I get a lot of my students, I would make sure that the professors, understand education, so they know where I'm coming from, but that they have worked in corporate and are probably still doing some work with corporate. Because I want to go there and they need to tell me about it. My corporate experience was in the 2003 to 2010 kind of thing, so, and I was getting my doctorate while working in corporate. So, you have to consider, when I was first started teaching, I realized that even though I had worked in corporate, my stories were getting old. Like, I'm talking like all of a sudden I'm at like 5 years of, hey, 5 years ago, I wrote this proposal and this is what we did. And so what I did is I got back into consulting. So I do a lot of consulting, but like, you need to make sure your professors are actually still doing this stuff. If your goal is not to be a researcher, make sure your professor's goal is not just to be a researcher, because some professors, that's their goal. They all have different goals. So make sure you're going into a program that meets your end goals. Look for that work experience. I think professor work experience is a huge thing in our field and a huge problem, because I think that a lot of faculty become faculty and they stop working in the field. I don't mean they don't care about the field anymore, because they do, but there's a big disconnect in our field between researchers and practitioners. Huge disconnect. So if you're trying to be that practitioner, make sure you're going into a program that's focusing on that practitioner. That's my piece of advice. If you're looking to be a professor eventually and to be a researcher, I would go to a research-based program. All right. So let's see, that's just some stuff I would look for as a student, looking for a master's program in our field. Someone asked about that. Next question here, I see someone's asking about e-learning salary range. And, I've done a number of blog posts about this throughout the years. It really hasn't changed that much. Obviously, pays went up, but not significantly. It's more or less, been pretty consistent, at least for the past 9 years, I would say. But, when people were talking about like e-learning salaries, how much should I be paid? What I usually try to do is I say, first of all, what are you actually doing for this client? Because that justifies your pay in a lot of different ways. Sometimes someone's doing everything and they just need like an average. And I usually say, when I'm hiring an instructional designer as a consultant, which is what I do, I don't have full-time employees. I hire everyone as a 1099. So I usually will never pay someone lower than $60 an hour. Never. That's the bare minimum I will pay someone as a freelance consultant for me, 60 an hour. And that's for any kind of work. Now, I am very picky when I hire people. Try to run a pretty tough interview and make sure I'm hiring a really good instructional designer, but I won't pay someone under 60 an hour. So you want to know what the bare minimum is? It's $60 an hour. And depending on the work that I'm doing, like I will try to pay them much closer to $100 if I can. And you have to remember, when I'm paying a consultant 60 an hour, that means I'm probably billing them out at like $80 an hour, because I have to make money too. I try to make about 30% off the top of what I'm billing them. So if they're billing out at 60, I'm probably making like, $18 off of that. So I'm probably billing them out like $75 to $80 an hour to the client. But I have to make that money or it's not worth me getting the contract. And I have to manage this person as well. I have to review all their work, and I'm not usually billing that out. So I have to make money somewhere. So that's where I make my money. So know that when you're a contractor, your client's always billing you out at a certain rate. Now, when I talked about e-learning work, there's different kinds of work in our field. So if like someone hires me personally, I won't budge for like less than like 125 plus an hour, because I just don't have the time to. But if someone wants to hire me for development, like just doing like Captivate work and the design's already done, it's been storyboarded out and stuff, I wouldn't charge them a lot of money. I'm saying like the bare minimum, the 60 an hour, or maybe even less for just that kind of work. But if someone wants me to talk strategy with them, a company's writing a big proposal, they're working on a presentation for like a $200 million contract, and they need some strategy. And that's kind of where I get called a lot is, hey, we're developing this proposal. Does this all make sense? What are some sources to back up what we're trying to do here? Does our presentation look good? What would you recommend we do to come at this from the researcher professor angle? And that's when I do charge a lot more money. Or if I'm doing like design, strictly instructional design work, analysis, design, any kind of implementation, evaluation, I charge a lot more. But development itself, a lot less. So pay varies, but I think bare minimum someone should be charging is 60 an hour. I know I won't pay anyone that. And most of my students that graduate, when I talk to them a year later, I'll ask them what they're getting. And it's between 60 and 100 an hour. Those that are in consulting, while they're a student, they're getting much less money. They're a student, they're working in internship. They might get anywhere from unpaid internship, though usually they're pretty good in our field. They are paid. But I like to see them get $30 to $45 an hour, being paid as a student worker. Let's see, what are some other questions here? Someone's asking, talk to me about analysis. What is analysis? What is the big A in ADDIE? What's the difference between task analysis, job analysis? And when do you do a needs analysis for it? The needs assessment versus the gap analysis? Well, that's a pretty big question. And obviously that's someone just interested in the field, because if you're in the field and you're asking those questions, that would be a big, red flag. So someone's just, curious about our field, and we do throw a lot of these words around. Even the books do it. They don't do a good job of distinguishing what these things actually are, which I've always found so problematic. And like, when do you do this stuff? And, when do you start analysis before you're getting paid? And like, when do you write up a proposal during the analysis? Because the analysis is the end goal of the analysis is what the problem is and what the goals are going to be of the project. You're solving it, and how you're going to solve it. So how can you write a proposal before you've done any kind of analysis? You can't, and sometimes you have to. But this is one of the things I'm covering in my new book that I'm writing right now. Is my chapter on analysis is really, what are the differences between these analyses? When do you do them? Like, you obviously start with a front end analysis, right? The goal of the front end analysis is to determine what's the problem, what's the cause of the problem, how are we going to solve the problem? And I don't mean how are we going to solve the problem, like how specifically I'm going to use Captivate, blah, blah. I mean, is it a training problem? Is the solution some kind of training? Is the solution communication? What is the actual solution? So what I like to do is I like to do that front end analysis. And usually, sometimes, ideally in a perfect world, I have a month to go into a company and do a front end analysis and a needs analysis and write them a proposal that I know is 100% correct. But realistically, I probably have like, 1 to 2 client meetings, and then they usually give me access to their subject matter expert for a meeting or two, and they usually send me some of their materials, and that's all I have. So we're talking a max of maybe 3 to 4 hours with the client, and them sending me some materials for me to have a proposal for them with a solution. So you usually have to be pretty quick, but you learn, what is the key information to look for. And one of the things I run into most often with my clients is they don't know training, they don't know instructional design, they just know they need training or want training, and there's some problem that could be solved with training. And they'll tell me what they want, but they don't know. The issue is they don't know what they want. So I have to help fill in the gaps, and I have to make sure when I have the client on for that 1 hour phone call or lunch meeting or whatever it is, that I am really, really, really trying to find out their needs so that I can give them a proper solution that's going to solve their problem. And I have to really dig down sometimes, because sometimes they say they want training, but their definition of training is not the same as mine. What they want is a job aid, or they just want like a job aid video or a job aid like Word document or something. And that is a type of training in a sense. So not to dismiss it, but when I think of training, I think of getting users to go through some kind of course, some kind of e-learning. They're remembering something. I'm going to assess them on it to make sure they know it. I'm not just creating a how-to video, putting it on, their server or whatever, because that is a different kind of training. So I have to really kind of nail those things down with the client and figure out what they want. And it can be really challenging when you have this little time frame to work with that. It's even more challenging when all you have is like a one-page white paper or email, and they want a proposal from there, to recommend a solution. So, that all becomes problematic, and it's definitely a challenge and something that takes experience, and when I talk to clients, I have to really reach out and figure out what's wrong and come up with a really good solution for them. So I don't think that that's a simple thing, but, back to what this person asked, what is an analysis? We have, front-end analysis, and the big confusion is what's the difference between the needs assessment, the needs analysis, when do you do the gap analysis? Because, if you look at like how to do front-end analysis, they tell you to do a gap analysis and an organizational analysis. And then if you look at like Taking Carry or one of these instructional design models, same thing, where they are asking you to do, like, they mentioned performance analysis, which is the front end analysis. And so the terminology gets really thrown around and confusing. What I try to do with my students, at least give them the big picture, like, what's the point? Here are all these types of analyses. Here's the end goal of this. You need to get to that end goal. It's going to differ by company. Like, when I've worked with a client for 5 years, I don't need to do an organizational analysis because I know them. I don't need to do that. I don't need to do the front end analysis because I may know them so well. I don't need to do the learner analysis because I know them so well. So you have to kind of consider, like, what do we know versus what we don't. But you always have to do there always has to be some kind of analysis. I see some models out there like that don't have an analysis, and that confuses me. It's like they have a solution for a problem without hearing what the problem is yet. And that's bothers me as an instructional designer. Let's see some of the other things happening in the instructional design world. Someone posted like a funny meme, like, when a new theory model comes out, I'm looking like there's the newest ID trend. Okay, let's see. People have some questions about Captivate. What's the difference? So here's a question, differences in terminology. What's the difference between e-learning and educational technology and instructional technology? Unfortunately, we do have operational definitions of all these things. Like, if I'm talking to someone in the field that I know knows the field really well, I can use these terms and I know they know exactly what I'm talking about. But there's also the public definition of what these things mean. And, so one of the things I have to do is I have to be really careful when I'm talking to a client. And when they say these words, I have to say, what do you mean by that? So a client says, we want online learning. I have to say, what do you mean by that? Because to me, online learning means any learning that's happening online, right? It doesn't have to be, it can be synchronous, it can be asynchronous. There are many different media mediums I can use to deliver that. I have a lot of different options in my head. But usually when they're talking about online, when a client comes to me and says, we want this to be online, usually what they mean is they mean a computer-based module that is online that someone can take anytime. There's no discussion or anything like that. It's like a computer-based module. I mean, that's what I'm developing 90% of the time. That's what people want. That's what we tend to do a lot. If that's what people kind of think training is now, it's just these modules, and it doesn't work like that well. It's like we're trying to fit this round, this square peg into a round hole kind of thing, with all this computer-based training that we develop for every single thing. But what we've got to do is, I really need to talk to the client and figure out what they mean by this term. So when they say online learning, I need to say, what exactly, can you explain what what this online course looks like? Because I need to figure out what they mean. So I can tell someone the difference between e-learning, online learning, instructional design, educational technology, but that doesn't mean that's what everyone else thinks. So like Edtech, educational technology, is more like K to 12. It's like geared towards education. So when I think of like an educational technology master's program, I think of like a program geared towards K to 12 educators, not working with companies, not producing people going to companies. When I think of instructional technology, I think of a program that is producing people going into corporate, who are going to be organizational training, trainers, or instructional designers, project managers, that kind of stuff. When I think of instructional design, I think of it can really go either or. When I think of online learning, I'm thinking of everything, but really when I say online learning to everyone else, it means an asynchronous course in some way or fashion, whether that's computer-based training or an actual like learning management system-based course where there's like discussion and everything else. But that's what they mean. They very rarely mean like live or some kind of like video synchronous interaction. And then we have like, what is e-learning? What does e-learning mean? E-learning is really just another term for computer-based training. That's what we're talking about when we talk about e-learning courses. But there will be people that say, no, e-learning has to have this and that. I had someone tell me one time that my blog wasn't a blog because I didn't allow discussions on it. I thought that is the strangest thing ever. I don't allow discussions on my blog because every day I'm logging all this spam on the thing. So until I found better spam removal tools, I didn't have time to just sit there and manage comments. It wasn't worth it, but it's still a blog. And then they ask, and we talk about distance education. The funny thing is, distance education is actually started in the 1800s, probably started way before that, but the earliest records we have of it are the 1800s. Distance education simply means education is at a distance. In the 1800s, we were training people they were getting mail courses like through snail mail or and actually I think it might have been Pony Express, like that way back that far. So we've had distance ed forever. Even like you think about, I remember all the older faculty always talk about correspondence courses in the 70s, like that you could take from home with tapes and stuff. And I remember as a kid seeing my dad with like this DVD that was like the size of a record. It was monstrous, pretty funny. I don't think I have anything that's that big. And no, you weren't taking them on like a typewriter, but you're taking them on, you put a DVD and you do stuff on like a computer like the one sitting behind me, which is kind of funny. And so you could always take distance ed courses. But an online course is a distance ed course too. So someone said we want distance education. What do they really mean? We have to find all that stuff out. So asking about terminology with a client is really important because they all have different takes on what it is. Let's just do one more thing, and I think I'm going to log off here. Resume review and feedback is a huge one. Something I talk to students about all the time. I don't think I've ever gotten a resume from a student that I said, this is perfect. I don't have any major feedback for you. I always, always, always have major feedback. And it's just because it's hard. And a lot of them are coming from different careers, so their resume looks a little different. And they get confused, like, how do you, so like in my classes, I have my students, so talking about what to look for in a master's program, I have my students work with real clients probably like 4 times, almost like 4 internships in my program. And they're like, well, how do we put that on? We did a real consulting project for this client. How do we put that on your resume? And so I have to help them with a lot of that. And I created a video how to create your resume simply for, as an instructional designer, simply for my students. And, the big things are, don't put an objective. Do not put an objective unless you're applying for a very specific position. Like if I was, if I had, when you're applying to like a really senior level position, you have a specific kind of headhunter that's finding that position for you. And if I was looking, if I'm applying to like a CEO position at like a major company, I might put an objective that, I want to be some kind of strategic leader at a company. Like I might have some kind of an objective on my resume at that point. But like as an instructional designer, you shouldn't have an objective. They know you're applying for the job, what you want. The only thing you're going to do with that objective is hurt yourself and accidentally say something else. I actually had a person on a resume say that their dream job was working for like the Boston Red Sox or something, and we were joking that we should invite them in and hit grounders with them during their during the interview for the company baseball team. So you do have to be careful, but you want to see it very simple. The basic breakdown of a resume is education first, until you're applying to those very senior positions where they know like who you are, kind of like it's a, education first, work experience, and it's relevant work experience. And then other work experience, that can show off any of your skills. You might have a skills section. You don't really need references unless you need to fill up space. As far as like length, 2 pages is absolutely common. 1 page as a new person is great, perfectly fine. No pictures, not for instructional design. No pictures, no colored paper, no paper that smells, nothing like that. And yes, I've seen all of that stuff. And yes, I've seen people recommend to do all of that stuff. And yes, I've gotten those resumes and we have tossed them in the garbage can. So, when I was working in a company. So don't do any of that stuff. Simple, basic. How should you format it? Like, what should it look like? Plain paper, formatted. Make it as easy as possible to read everything. That's it. Just very simple. I've gotten some resumes that it's like they tried to make it really creative and I can't find the information I need to. And when you're looking at like a few hundred resumes, it's got to be like 1 second or like it's getting tossed. So you've got like, 3 seconds of that person's attention. So you better make it pretty easy to find. Obviously, second page, if it's 2 pages, it's the less important stuff. Because that's the person who's really interested is going to turn that page and look at it. Always make sure that it's PDF, not Word. Because what the problem is, someone sends me their resume in Word and I'm like, it's weird. Your last line was on the second page. And they're like, oh, it wasn't on my computer. Yeah, because you sent it in Word. Always PDF, and it'll look the same on everyone's machine. But yeah, that's about all I have for today, unless anyone has any questions. But, that's a nice little 30-minute just chatting about the field, talking about stuff. I always like to do this every once in a while. I'd really like to do this daily or weekly, but I just don't have the time to. And I was doing some stuff in my office today and thought that it would be fun to do a nice little live chat. Just talk about different things in the field. So anyway, thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye.